offensive in Gaza today, but now Hamas says it wants a ceasefire after initially rejecting one. Joining me now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, it is good to see you this morning, and thank you for your time. Will you accept this ceasefire as you understand it that Hamas now seems to support?
Well, Hamas doesn't even accept its own ceasefire. It's continuing to fire at us as we speak. Israel has accepted 5 ceasefires since this conflict began. 5. We accepted them and we implemented them, including 2 humanitarian ceasefires in the last 24 hours, which Hamas rejected, as they rejected all the other ceasefires, and they violated them. So you say Israel resumed its offensive. No, we didn't resume our offensive. We had a ceasefire, they violated it, and now they're violating their own ceasefire. And obviously, we'll take whatever action is necessary to protect our people, including against the terror tunnels that they're trying to dig against us. Hamas is simply continuing all its operations, and Israel will not let this terror operation decide when it's convenient for them and not convenient for them to attack our people, when it's convenient for them to restock and reload, and when it's not convenient for them. We'll do whatever is necessary to protect our people.
So, to be certain that I understand, did someone from the UN or elsewhere come to you and say, Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire and here are the terms of it? Or are you just hearing this and seeing what's happening in Gaza and know that there is no ceasefire?
Well, as I say, there were 2 ceasefires, humanitarian ceasefires, brokered by the UN in the last 24 hours, which we agreed Hamas has violated. We maintained it. We allowed trucks to go in and so on for relief, for food, for drugs, for everything else that is needed in such cases. Hamas violated it. Now Hamas has floated that it wants a ceasefire beginning at 2 o'clock, and they've attacked us after that. So they're violating even their own ceasefire. And under these circumstances, Israel will simply do what it must do, what any country would do to defend its people.
Mr. Prime Minister, your defense minister recently talked about significantly broadening the ground operation in Gaza, asking Israeli soldiers to be prepared for that. There's a member of parliament talking about, quote, the next phase. What is that next phase? What is broadening the offensive mean?
Look, I'm not going to talk about specific military operations, but Israel is doing what any country would do, and certainly the U.S. would do. If 80% of your population were under rocket fire, and you had 60 seconds or 90 seconds to get into bomb shelters, if terror tunnels were dug underneath your border in order to come in and explode your kindergartens and massacre your people and kidnap American citizens, you would take action. If America was attacked by land, by sea, by air, you would take action. So Israel is taking action to neutralize this threat, and I'm not going to get into the specifics. Obviously, we hope we can get a sustainable quiet as soon as possible. I think the only path to do that is by adopting the Egyptian initiative that basically has no conditions except to try to begin to have a ceasefire, a cessation of all hostilities, and try to address the 2 underlying issues here. Security for Israel, which means demilitarizing Gaza and from all these rockets and tunnels and so on, and social and economic relief for the Palestinians. I think the 2 are intertwined. I think you can't get social and economic relief for the people of Gaza without having assured demilitarization, because otherwise all the money, all the concrete, all the cement that will go in will not be used to offer relief to the people of Gaza, but to build more terror tunnels and more rockets and more missiles. We need demilitarization. That's critical.
Do you disagree with the characterization that Israel is thinking about significantly broadening its operation in Gaza?
Candy, we will take what action is necessary to defend our people, both in the tactical sense and the strategic sense.
So is the military goal here for Israel to shut down all of the tunnels and stop Hamas from its constant firing of rockets into Israel, sort of destroy their infrastructure, or is it something short of that?
Well, I would say we want to stop the firing of rockets for sure, but we also want to dismantle the terror tunnel networks that we've uncovered I don't know if we'll have 100% success. Our soldiers are dealing with that right now. Just imagine, I mean, these are, you know what these tunnels are? I mean, Hamas received international aid from the Qataris and from others. They've received a lot of money. And people said to us, enable concrete and cement to go into Gaza so they can build Gaza, build schools, build hospitals and so on. They took all that cement and built this vast tunnel network penetrating into Israel so they can come out under our towns, our cities, our schools, and explode our children, explode our kindergarten. They took money that was cement that was meant to build kindergartens for Palestinian children and used it to dig tunnels to explode our kindergartens. So obviously this is just a non-starter. It has to stop. And I think that one of the things that we're dealing with right now is how to dismantle this tunnel network. Our forces are busily engaging in it. I don't think we'll have 100% success. I can't guarantee that, but we'll have major success. We already have achieved
major inroads on that. Mr. Prime Minister, you know there is a battle on the ground, and then there is a battle in the headlines. My question to you is whether, given the recent demonstrations we're now seeing in the West Bank and the anti-Israeli rallies that we're seeing in some areas of the West, do you think are you worried that you are making more enemies than you are killing?
Well, Hamas is betting on this because Hamas is betting on the fact that people don't have the context, that they can hoodwink people, basically mislead the entire world. First, I'd like to blow up the West Bank. There's no question about it. And I think President Abbas is charged with the responsibility, formal and practical, of keeping things under control there, because Hamas would like, obviously, to have explosions there as well. Secondly, vis-a-vis world opinion. The world is responding to something that is heart-wrenching, and that is any civilian casualty. We don't want to see a single civilian casualty. We're not targeting a single civilian, but we're faced with a very ruthless terrorist enemy that, you know, Lords bin Laden, accused the United States of killing him, is recognized as a terrorist organization by the United States, by the EU, and anybody with a right mind understands this. And they don't care about not only targeting our civilians, but hiding behind their civilians as human shields. When we ask Palestinians to leave the places from which Hamas is firing against us, Hamas is telling them to stay. Why are they telling them to stay? Because they want to pile up more and more dead bodies of Palestinian civilians. So when you look at the civilian tolls, which is what people are responding to, I ask decent people everywhere to remember this. Hamas is responsible for that. Hamas is responsible, and Hamas should be held accountable for these civilian deaths.
And yes, it is a fact, and people have shown that Hamas does hide weaponry in schools, that it does urge civilians to stay, even though Israel is saying get out of there. But does all of that, in your mind, relieve Israel of its stated desire not to have any harm come to civilians? Is there something more you could be doing looking at what we're seeing going on in Gaza in terms of the victims?
Candy, we're doing everything we can, and the history of warfare has not yet enabled any army, any civilized army, the army of a democracy like Israel, to be able to deal with a ruthless terrorist enemy that uses civilians as a human shield without having some incidental civilian casualties. Israel does not target a single civilian. But if you think of what you would do, what the United States would do under similar circumstances, you would act, at the very least, in the same way, and many countries have. I think this is...
But you know that civilians are there, so I guess my question is, if you know that civilians are there, along with, intermingled with Hamas, is there a responsibility to try to figure that out with more precision than it seems to be figured out at this point?
Well, we're doing exactly that. We're doing exactly that. But remember, Hamas is firing at our cities, at our people, firing from these areas, from these homes, from these schools, from mosques, from hospitals. They're actually using them as weapon storage, as command posts, and as firing positions, or right next to them. And so what would you do? Would you say, all right, we can't do anything because they're hiding behind civilians. That's their whole strategy. You'd actually give them immunity. You'd give terrorist organizations a powerful weapon. If you say that democracies, a legitimate democracy, cannot act against a terror organization because it is using civilians as a human shield, and therefore it should absorb attacks on its own civilians, on its own forces, you're giving them a tremendous victory. And I think that's wrong. I think you want to minimize, as we do in any way that we can, civilian casualties, and we don't target civilians, but you don't want to give the terrorists the immunity because they use civilians as a human shield. That's a mistake. I don't think Americans or Europeans or Asians or anyone else would want to have this established as a principle. That's deadly for the peace of the world. A great victory for terrorism, that would be.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, again, I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Candy. Good to talk to you.